Hi, I'm Mike Beliveau, and today I'm back here at the West Shore Sportsmans Association, and we're going to be shooting my Smith & Wesson 1917 revolver. This is chambered for 45 ACP, and it's the first true end frame. So let's take a look at it. Well, I started off at the West Shore Sportsmans Association, but as you guys have seen in other videos, it can be a little hard to compete with all the other shooting going on there. So I did a little bit of shooting there, but I decided to pack it up, and I knew I'd be in Duelist Den before too long. So I waited until I could get into the den. So you'll see some scenes at the Sportsman's Association and some scenes shot at the den. So let's get busy. Well, the Smith & Wesson model 1917 has a history that goes back actually to Great Britain before World War I. And, during the Victorian and Edwardian eras, Great Britain did not have a huge army establishment. And most of their army was stationed across the empire to keep the peace there. So they were not held in really high regard by all of the big European powers. In fact, Otto von Bismarck, who was the Chancellor of Germany and a noted wit, he once remarked when he was asked, "What would you do if the British Army turned up on German shores?" And he said, "If that happened, I would send a policeman to arrest it." So that gives you an idea of what he was thinking of the British Army. But as World War I became more inevitable, Britain mobilized a huge force. And they found that they just did not have enough of their Webley 4.55 revolvers to outfit the army. So they came to Smith & Wesson and they asked if Smith & Wesson could produce a revolver for the 4.55 Webley cartridge. And as it turns out, the Smith & Wesson had a very good candidate for that in their hand ejector first model, which is colloquially known as the triple lock, because it locked up at the front of the cylinder ejector pin, at the back of the cylinder, and there was a triple lock on the crane. So a very good rigid system, way over-engineered, but Smith & Wesson was known for that. And that was in 44 Special. So they were able to take that gun, screw a 45 caliber barrel onto it, ream the cylinders for 4.55 Webley, and they were off to the races. And as it turned out, the British ended up rejecting that gun because the triple lock was just too susceptible to jamming up from dust and debris in their tests. So they asked Smith & Wesson to make a few changes, and one of the changes was getting rid of that triple lock. And as it turned out, that triple lock really wasn't needed at all. The lock at the front of the cylinder pin and at the back of the cylinder pin, quite sufficient. And the resulting gun was really the first modern end frame. It had all the features that their end frames continue to have right until this day. But World War I hit before that gun could go into production. And the Brits ended up happily taking every triple lock they could get their hands on, and then the improved hand ejector second model in 4.55 Webley. Well, as it turned out, America, of course, was trying to stay out of the war, and we were trying to remain neutral, and there were a lot of reasons for that. And what you may not know is that one of the largest immigrant groups in the country at the time were German Americans. Many of them were just first and second generation here in America, and they obviously felt an affinity for their homeland, and they were a very big political bloc. The other thing that you have to recall is that we had fought the Revolutionary War against Great Britain, we fought the War of 1812 against Great Britain, and in the Civil War, Great Britain backed the Confederacy. And there were a lot of people still around who remembered that. So there was a fair amount of anti-Anglo feeling in the country. Now that was balanced off by the fact that at that point most of the population still had Anglo-Saxon roots, and there was some affinity for it. So there was quite a bit of pull, but that special relationship, it wasn't all the way there then, the way it came to be by World War II, let's say. So we were trying to hold out. And two things turned the tide on that. One was the sinking of the Lusitania, which was not an American ship. And in fact, a German U-boat sank it. And they probably had good reason. It was loaded with munitions. But it also had over 1,000 passengers on it, over 100 of which were Americans. And it caused a huge furor at the time. And that was fairly early in the war, so that wasn't enough to drag us in. But the straw that broke the camel's back was the Zimmermann telegram. And the Zimmermann telegram was a secret cable that went from Germany to Mexico. And it urged Mexico to invade the United States. And the Germans said that if the Mexicans would invade the United States to tie them up so they wouldn't come in to aid France and England, the Germans would give them financial and military aid, and they would see to it that the Mexicans recovered Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California. Well, as you can imagine, this caused some real outrage in America, and that was enough to push us into war. But when we went to war, we found we were in the same position as Great Britain had been in. We did not have a large standing army at all. We had just adopted in 1911 a new handgun, the 1911 semi-automatic. And even though Colt had made plenty of those, it hadn't made nearly enough of them. So the Army went to Smith & Wesson and asked if they could design a big bore revolver that would fire the .45 ACP cartridge. They didn't want to go back to the .45 Colt. And there was some talk of that, but they just didn't want the logistics problem of supplying two kinds of ammunition. And as it turns out, Smith & Wesson had been giving that problem some thought already. And that ended up being a bit of genius. Joseph Weston, who was president of Smith & Wesson at the time, invented what we would now call moon clips. And he invented the half moon clip, which was a piece of spring steel stamped out that you could load rimless cartridges in, put them in the revolver, and the gun's star extractor would be able to work against the moon clip and eject the cartridges. And this was a phenomenal idea, and it made it viable to use a revolver with rimless cartridges. And the 1917 Smith & Wesson was born. And it was a huge success. But even though they were making them as fast as they could turn them out, the Army wanted to make them faster. And in 1918, the government actually took over the Smith & Wesson factory and ran it as a government entity for the next year or so to try to boost production. Though when the war was over, they returned it to Smith & Wesson. But it's one of the first times that's ever been done, where an American company was seized by the government and run by the government. And it was certainly the first time Smith & Wesson had not been run by a member of the Wesson family. So it's actually kind of shocking. But the gun stayed in production through the 1940s, and it was used right up into World War II. They were still being used in World War II, some usually in back echelon applications like for guards and things like that, but there were a good number of them that were used in combat because there were some men and quite a few officers who actually preferred the double action revolver to the semi-automatic handgun. So this was a gun for two wars. Now, because the gun stayed in production until 1949, Smith & Wesson ultimately produced over 210 of these. So actually, they made way over 210 of these. The actual number was over 210,000 model 1917s. And the gun was also made by Colt. and it was made using their new service revolver platform, their big 45 ACP double action, or 45 Colt double action, chambered to 45 ACP. And Colt produced 150,000 of them for the war effort. So there were a lot of these guns around. They were quite successful. And after 1920, a lot of them came out on the surplus market. And a lot of people did not like using moon clips in the civilian life. So let me show you what the answer was to that. Well, we've been shooting this with the moon clips, which are handy. But a lot of these were sold as surplus on the civilian market after World War I, and civilians really didn't like it much. So, in 1920, the Peters Ammunition Company developed the 45 auto rim. And it's got a thick rim, and basically what it does is it replicates the head spacing of the 45 ACP on the moon clip, so you can load it like a conventional revolver. And as you can see, the rims allow the star extractor to work on it. So it's basically just a 45 ACP, whoops, just a 45 ACP with a thick rim instead of a rimless design. Now these are made by Black Hills Ammunition. I don't think they're making any right now. But you can buy brass and load your own, which is what I've been doing for years. Alright, well, you all know about the famous Zimmermann telegram where the Germans contacted the Mexicans and asked them to go to war against us. And they said if they did, that they would see to it that they got Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California back. Well, what a lot of people don't know is that there was a second Zimmermann telegram, and that one came to Evil Roy. The German government said if he would wage war on Blymeyer Hollow and tie up the Pennsylvania National Guard, that they would give him Harrisburg. So it's time to stop Evil Roy before he can keep us out of World War I. Now, the 1917 is a double action revolver, which means it shoots in both single action mode and double action mode. And I'm going to try it first single action on Evil Roy. Okay, well, I gotta say, the grip configuration on this gun, these old-timey Smith & Wesson grips, they really don't control the recoil the way more modern grips do on the same end-frame revolver. So you really feel this thing. And that's not a good thing. Okay, well, let's try Evil Roy again, this time in double action mode. Missed one of those. Well, like I said, these grips, they make it a little bit hard to hold on to, but still, it does the job. Well, to load this, it's much like any Smith & Wesson revolver. You push the latch forward, cylinder swings out. Now, because this gun is made for a rimless cartridge, it loads with moon clips, which Smith & Wesson invented. Now, the originals would have been half moon clips with 3 rounds each. I'm going to use modern full moon clips for this. But that's how we load her up. Let's give it a try on the steel plates in single action mode just to see how it does. Well, that is quite a handful to shoot. Well, every good handgun deserves a good holster, and I have two for the 1917, and both of these holsters fit my Smith & Wesson and my Colt 1917s. They're both from El Paso Saddlery, and the first one is the aptly named 1917 holster and belt rig, and this was an official Army holster for the 1917, a replica of that. And I like it just because it's an official Army holster of it. It's not my favorite holster. My favorite holster for this gun is actually a Patton holster, named after General Patton. And it's basically a T.O. Myers river rig. Same thing as a Jordan, Bill Jordan border holster. A very early 20th century style, canted forward, extremely comfortable draw. Like I said, it's made by El Paso Saddlery, and I just really love this holster as a carry holster for almost any type of double action revolver. I have this same holster size for a number of my .357 Magnum revolvers. So anyway, that is what I use to carry the 1917. So that's the story of the Smith & Wesson Model 1917. This is a phenomenal revolver. And I have to say, the action, like so many pre-World War II Smith & Wesson and Colt revolvers, the action is silky smooth. And even with these vintage grips, this is an eminently shootable gun. This is a gun that you would have been happy to carry to war, or you would have been happy to carry for self-defense. And I have to say, it's one of my favorites. And I'll do something on the Colt 1917 as well in the future, because that is also a phenomenal gun. But of the two of them, and I hate to say this because I'm a Colt guy, of the two of them, I give the nod to the Smith & Wesson, because the end frame is actually a little more ergonomic than the Colt's new service, which requires a bigger man than me to shoot it, and I'm a big guy. But I have to modify the grip a little bit to comfortably reach the trigger on that. And I can do that even with the vintage grips on the Smith & Wesson. It's just a very, very comfortable gun to shoot. And it's silky smooth, though both of them are. We'll do the Colt before too long as well. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, you know what to do. All right, big thumbs up. And if you're not a subscriber to the channel, come on over and subscribe. We would love to have you. We'll have lots of historical firearms videos to come, and I wouldn't want you to miss any of them. So until next week, bye.